Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to my YouTube channel. Today I am going to discuss respiratory physiology. And the first lecture that I am starting in the respiratory physiology is basic concepts. This lecture contains basic concepts which will help you to understand oxygen and carbon dioxide transport in lungs. Now let's start our topic. Today the topic of my discussion is first topic of my discussion is bronchial circulation. There are two types of blood circulation in the lungs. One is the pulmonary circulation and other is the bronchial circulation. Pulmonary circulation carries deoxygenated blood away from the heart to the lungs and returns oxygenated blood back to the heart, while the bronchial circulation supplies blood to the tissues of the larger airways of the lungs, and these airways are bronchi, bronchioles, not alveoli, only bronchiole up to bronchioles. The bronchial circulation receives approximately 2% of the total output of the left ventricle of the heart. Bronchial circulation originates from two sources. One is the bronchoesophageal artery and the other is the right apical bronchial artery. And this right apical bronchial artery is a branch of bicarotid trunk. Bronchoesophageal artery supplies the airways and interlobular septa of most of the lungs, while right apical bronchial artery supplies the airways of right apical lobe. Interlobular septa is a fibrous septa that forms the border of a unit of lung which is supplied by 3 to 5 terminal bronchioles. So, a unit of lung which is supplied by 3 to 5 terminal bronchioles is contained by a fibrous septa, and this septa is interlobular septa. And we all know what is apical lobe of lung. So, bronchoesophageal artery supplies the airways and interlobular septa, and apical bronchial artery supplies right apical lobe, airways of the right apical lobe. Bronchial arteries follow the tracheobronchial tree. Tracheobronchial tree is a tree-like structure that is formed by the divisions of trachea up to the terminal bronchioles. First, trachea divides into two bronchi, then further bronchioles. So, the whole tree-like structure that is formed in one lung is known as tracheobronchial tree. And bronchial arteries follow this tracheobronchial tree up to the terminal bronchioles and then forms a bronchial plexus in the connective tissue along the length of airways. Actually, a plexus is a network of nerves or vessels. So, bronchial arteries form a bronchial plexus in the connective tissue along the length of these airways, means bronchi, bronchioles. Then, branches from this plexus penetrate the smooth muscle layer of the bronchial wall and penetrate deep below its epithelium, below the epithelium of bronchial wall, and then form a subepithelial vascular plexus. And this subepithelial vascular plexus also serves to warm the inhaled air. Branches from this plexus are also given to form the vasa vasorum of pulmonary vessel. Vasa vasorum is simply neutral blood vessels. As we know that after the terminal bronchioles, alveoli are present. So at the level of terminal bronchioles, bronchial vessels anastomose with the pulmonary circulation. So bronchial vessels will be continued or they will intermingle with the pulmonary circulation which is present around the alveolus. Only few anastomoses are present between the pulmonary and bronchial arteries, while most of the anastomoses are present between the bronchial and pulmonary capillaries or at venular level. In this way, bronchial circulation mixes up with the pulmonary circulation. The extensiveness of the bronchial blood supply to the pleura varies among different species. For example, in cattle, sheep, and horses, the bronchial artery provides blood to the visceral pleura. But in case of dogs, cats, and monkeys, it doesn't do this. Although the bronchial circulation provides nutrient blood flow to many lung structures, the lungs doesn't die if the bronchial circulation is obstructed. The extensive anastomosis between the bronchial and pulmonary vessels provide pulmonary blood flow to the bronchial vessels. Similarly, when the pulmonary circulation is obstructed, the bronchial circulation proliferates and maintains the blood flow to the lungs. The bronchial circulation also proliferates when the airways are inflamed. So we have seen that the function of the lungs is not the function of lungs is not halted in the absence of bronchial circulation, but it provides a very important role when the pulmonary circulation is obstructed or when airways are inflamed. Our next topic is pulmonary circulation. So first we discuss the route of the blood from heart to lungs, from lungs to tissues, and from tissues back to the heart. Firstly, right ventricle pumps blood to the lungs through pulmonary arteries, and these arteries divide into pulmonary capillaries. These pulmonary capillaries then join to form pulmonary veins within the lungs. These veins then carry oxygenated blood from lungs to the left atrium. Then left atrium pumps it in the left ventricle. Left ventricle pumps the blood to the systemic circulation. In this way, the blood flows in whole of the body tissues and muscles and where it is needed. Then blood from the lungs that is being pumped by the lungs that is being pumped by the heart, the left ventricle of heart contains high oxygen, and this high oxygen content is supplied to the body tissues, while body tissues contain more carbon dioxide content than this blood. So carbon dioxide present in tissues is brought to the lungs with the help of this blood. In this way, blood is oxygenated in lungs and then transported to the left side of the heart. This left side pumps the oxygenated blood, highly oxygenated blood, to the tissues of the body and collects deoxygenated blood from the tissues of the body and pumps back it into the heart, right side of the heart. And then this right side of the heart carries the blood to the lungs, and it is and the carbon dioxide present in this blood is expelled out. Our next topic is the exchange of gases between alveoli and capillaries. As we know that alveoli are surrounded by many capillaries, and the gases like carbon dioxide and oxygen are not directly poured into the capillaries, as there is no such a connection for their pouring. The only mechanism by which gases transport from the alveoli to the capillaries or from capillaries to the alveoli is the diffusion. And we know that diffusion is the passive movement of gases down a concentration gradient. And in this case of gaseous exchange, diffusion is the passive movement of gases from a region of higher partial pressure to the region of lower partial pressure. This rate of movement of gases depends upon the physical properties of gas, surface area available for diffusion, and thickness of the air-blood barrier, and last, the driving pressure gradient of the gas between the alveolus and capillary blood. So the rate of movement of gases between the alveolus and blood is guided by four factors, which are physical properties of the gas, other is surface area available for diffusion, next is the thickness of air blood barrier, and last one is the driving pressure gradient of the gas between alveolus and capillary blood. Physical properties of the gas include properties like its molecular weight and the solubility of the gas. Alveolar surface area refers to the surface area that is available for gas exchange, and that surface area is provided by pulmonary capillaries through which blood is flowing. So we can say that the alveolar surface area available for diffusion is that surface area that is occupied by perfused pulmonary capillaries. During exercise, more capillaries become perfused by the blood, and thus the surface area available for diffusion increases. As the number of perfused capillaries increases, the rate of blood flow also increases, and the gases dissolved in the blood that is supplied to the alveolus also increases. So the surface area in this way surface area is increased, which increases the diffusion of gases. Next factor is the surface area available for diffusion. In the lungs, the barrier that is separating air and blood is an epithelial layer which is formed of type 1 epithelial cells, a basement membrane, and a layer of endothelium. The capillaries contain innermost layer endothelium and outer layer. Their outer layer is basement membrane. So these two layers are present in capillaries, and similarly in alveoli, one is the epithelial layer and other is the basement membrane. So these all membranes form the barrier which is separating the air and blood in alveoli. The gases contained in the alveoli are diffused into the capillary blood, and those contained in the capillary blood are diffused to the alveoli. And in addition to these moving gases through the air-blood barrier, diffusion also moves gases within the plasma, and this allows oxygen to gain access to the erythrocytes and hemoglobin. So diffusion within the blood plasma causes the oxygen to gain access to erythrocytes and hemoglobin and provides erythrocytes and hemoglobin with oxygen. The blood which is entering the alveolar capillary from small pulmonary arteries is known as mixed venous blood. Why it is mixed venous blood? Because it is the blood that has returned to the right side of the heart in veins from all parts of the systemic circulation. So the blood from the systemic circulation is poured into the heart, and the heart then pumps this mixed blood to the arteries of the pulmonary circulation. The driving pressure for gas diffusion is the difference in the oxygen tension between alveoli and the capillary blood. There are some important points that you need to remember before we start our proper discussion on the topic of oxygen and carbon dioxide exchange in the lungs. These points are that first point is the partial pressure of oxygen in arterial blood is 100 millimeters of mercury, while the partial pressure of oxygen in venous blood is 40 millimeter of mercury. Next point is that the diffusion of oxygen from arteries to capillaries is due to the difference in partial pressure of oxygen in both type of blood vessels. The next point is that the carbon dioxide tension of venous blood returning to the lungs is 46 millimeters of mercury, and alveolar carbon dioxide tension is 40 millimeters of mercury. Thus, the driving pressure for diffusion of carbon dioxide is only 6 millimeters of mercury. As I have told that alveolar carbon dioxide tension is 40 millimeters of mercury, and when this alveolar blood will pass through the tissues of the body which are continuously producing carbon dioxide, so a concentration gradient will be maintained between the alveolus blood and those and between the tissues of the body. As the oxygen content of the carbon dioxide content of the tissues is greater than that of the alveolar blood, sorry, it is not alveolar blood, it is venous blood. So when carbon dioxide will diffuse from the tissues of the body to this then carbon dioxide will diffuse from the tissues of the body to this venous blood, and the new partial pressure of carbon dioxide in the blood is now 46 millimeters of mercury. The other concept is that the amount of carbon dioxide that diffuses per minute between the capillaries and alveoli is similar to the amount of oxygen. And the last concept is that the solubility of carbon dioxide within the blood plasma is 20 times greater than the solubility of oxygen in blood plasma. Now let's talk about the exchange of gases between the tissues and the blood. When blood enters from the systemic circulation to the pulmonary arteries, its partial pressure of oxygen is 100 millimeters of mercury, and its hemoglobin is 75% saturated. It is the point that needs to be noted here. Then when the blood from these pulmonary arteries, is supplied to capillaries and finally into the pulmonary veins, mixing of bronchial and pulmonary blood occurs. Due to various anastomoses between the vessels of pulmonary circulation and bronchial circulation, the blood which has come along with the bronchial circulation has lower oxygen content and more carbon dioxide content, because it has already transferred oxygen to the deeper tissues of the lungs. So when both pulmonary and bronchial circulation will mix up, the new partial pressure of oxygen in the venous blood will be will now be, it will be 85 millimeters of mercury. So when this blood will pass to the heart and then pumped to the tissues, then partial pressure of oxygen in the blood which enters the tissues, the tissue capillaries from the systemic arteries is 85 millimeters of mercury, while pressure of carbon dioxide in it will be 40 millimeters of mercury. As this blood passes through the capillaries, it is exposed to the tissues which are producing carbon dioxide and consuming oxygen. Partial pressure of oxygen in tissues is 40 millimeters of mercury, while that of carbon dioxide is 46 millimeters of mercury. As a result of the partial pressure differences between the tissues and capillaries, the oxygen diffuses into the tissues and carbon dioxide diffuses into the blood, and this process will continue until the partial pressure of blood and tissues become equal. It means that when the partial pressure of carbon dioxide in the blood and in the tissues will equalize, that is when it will become 46 millimeters of mercury, then transport of carbon dioxide or diffusion of carbon dioxide will be halted. And similarly, when the partial pressure of oxygen in the blood, capillary blood, and in the tissues will be equalized, then this diffusion will stop. Tissues with a high oxygen demand have more capillaries per gram of tissue, and this provides a large surface area for diffusion. During exercise, muscle blood flow increases and capillaries bring blood closer to the metabolizing tissues and slows the rate of blood flow. And this slowing down of the rate of blood flow allows more time for diffusion equilibrium. In In addition, exercise lowers the partial pressure of oxygen and increases the partial pressure of carbon dioxide in muscles, and this increases the driving pressure gradient for diffusion. In this way, more of the oxygen is delivered to muscles, and carbon dioxide, which is being produced in higher quantities due to exercise within the muscles, is diffused out of the muscles to the blood.